He was talking about the frequency of partaking of the Lord's Supper. And he used 1 Corinthians, the 11th chapter, and at verse 26 as his text. He said, the Apostle Paul there said, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." And he had a problem just trying to define how often is often. And he made the statement that the Bible does not teach as to, by command, exactly when we are to partake of the Lord's Supper or how often we are to partake of it. And that is true. By command, we are not told. But he again, let me emphasize what he was talking about in this verse. He said that he didn't know what it meant, but he meant that we had to partake of it often. As often as you eat of this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes. As often. Now, he said he didn't know exactly how often that was to be, but it is to be often. Now, just think about if God had left it up to us to decide when we're to partake of the Lord's Supper or how often we're to partake of it. It would be everybody up to his own idea. Some people say, well, often would be every day. Others would say, well, it's every week. Others would say maybe every 2 weeks, or maybe often is every month, or maybe often is twice a year, or maybe often is once a year. And so you see how that would leave us. But we know that God doesn't do those things that way. That God is very specific as to those things that he wants us to do. And we find over in the book of Acts, the 20th chapter, we find there by example how often is. And the 20th chapter and at verse 7, we found there that Luke says, "Now on the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread." The purpose of their coming together on the first day of the week was to break bread. And since there is a first day in every week, then we know that we are to partake every first day of the week. Scholars who have studied this, have studied how the early church did this, agree that they met every first day of the week to partake of the Lord's Supper. And that's the example that we have. We know that we're doing what God would have us to do when we follow that example. We do not have a command, but we do have an example to partake on the first day of the week. So let's remember these things. Remember what we're doing. When we partake of these things, we're remembering the Lord's death until he comes again.